Dim the lights. Lie down on a comfortable, cozy bed. Let the world around you fade away. You're safe here. You're with history. Wake now. Tonight, we're going deep into the Nevada desert. Into a place that officially didn't exist for decades. A place guarded by barbed wire, warning signs, motion sensors, and silence. No name on the map. No admission by the government. Just endless dry land. And endless rumors. They call it Area 51. For some, it's just a military base. For others, it's the biggest cover-up in modern history. Aliens, crashed saucers, time travel, reverse-engineered technology, secret experiments, and underground labs. It's all been said to happen here, but why? Why? Area 51. What makes this patch of desert so hypnotizing? This isn't just a story about UFOs. It's about power, about lies, about the Cold War's invisible battleground, about the war between what is said and what is hidden. We live in a time flooded with information, but not all information is truth, and not all truth is allowed to reach the light. In this documentary, we'll peel back the decades. We'll explore the true origins of Area 51, how secret aircraft blurred into alien sightings, and how the government used disinformation to its advantage. We'll meet Bob Lazar, the man who changed the myth forever. And we'll listen to modern whistleblowers who claim that what's going on out there right now is even stranger than fiction. We'll walk through tunnels that may or may not exist, examine photos, documents, confessions, and silence. We'll trace the rise of alien hysteria during the Cold War, and how it may have been more useful to the military than you ever imagined. Most importantly, we'll ask the question at the heart of it all. What's more dangerous, the existence of aliens, or the idea that our governments might want us to believe in them? Welcome to History Wake. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Middle of Nowhere. Building the base in the vast emptiness of the Nevada desert, far from cities, highways, or curious eyes, there's a dry lake bed. Flat, quiet, endless. This place is Groom Lake. In the early 1950s, America was racing toward the future, but it was also looking over its shoulder at the Soviet Union. The Cold War wasn't just about armies. It was about information. Who knew more? Who could see further? Who could strike first? To keep up with that race, the United States needed eyes in the sky. They needed spy planes, and a place to test those planes where no one would find out. That's when Groom Lake was chosen. It all began with Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, an advanced research team known for building fast, strange, and often dangerous aircraft. Their new project was the U-2 spy plane, a high-altitude aircraft that could fly above Soviet radar and take photographs without being detected. The U-2 needed a long, flat surface, a place that could be easily guarded, hidden from the press and the world. Groom Lake, with its dry lake bed and empty surroundings, was perfect. The CIA, working with the Air Force and Lockheed, built the base in secret, with no grand announcements or news coverage, just silent construction crews and secured airspace. What began as a few temporary shelters quickly expanded into hangars, bunkers, barracks, and underground tunnels. The name Area 51, even that name was chosen carefully, part of the larger Nevada test and training range with different numbered sectors. Some say Area 51 was given its number deliberately, to be easy to forget or confuse with others. Others believe it's a code tied to atomic testing sites. By the late 1950s, Area 51 was fully operational, but you wouldn't find it on any map. Pilots were told not to fly near it. Military staff were flown in on unmarked planes, and deliveries arrived in covered trucks. Anyone who got too close was warned, sometimes by force, to leave immediately. Outside the gates, locals began to notice strange things. Lights in the sky that moved in impossible ways, deep rumblings underground, even claims of flashes of blue light shooting into the night sky without a sound. They didn't know they were witnessing test flights of the U-2, or later, the A-12 Oxcart and the SR-71 Blackbird, aircraft decades ahead of their time. These planes flew higher and faster than anything before, giving off radar signatures that no one could explain. To the average person, they looked alien, but the government said nothing, denying the base existed at all. If you filed a Freedom of Information Act request about Area 51 in the 1980s or 1990s, you'd get nothing. No files, no acknowledgement, as if the place didn't exist. Even pilots who worked on secret aircraft weren't told everything. Most operations were compartmentalized. If you worked on the landing gear, you only knew about the landing gear, not what the full plane looked like, or what it could do. That way, if you ever talked, you wouldn't reveal much. The people living near Groom Lake weren't fools. Many worked in military industries or had family in the service and understood secrecy, but over the years, the silence grew too loud and rumors began to spread, not just about planes, but about things not from this earth. There were whispers of crashed UFOs brought in for study, alien bodies stored underground, experimental craft that used anti-gravity, and communication systems that could control thoughts. Were these just stories made up by conspiracy theorists? Or did the intense secrecy around Area 51 create a vacuum? One the people filled with their fears, dreams, and wildest theories. Even the media got involved, but hit a wall. Journalists who tried to investigate were blocked. Cameras confiscated. In one case, employees who worked at the base and developed health problems from chemical exposure tried to sue the government. But the government responded by denying the facility existed at all. For decades, that was the official position. There is no Area 51. It wasn't until 2013 that the US government finally admitted the base was real, thanks to declassified CIA documents. But even then, they only discussed the U-2 and A-12 programs. No aliens, no mind control, no anti-gravity. Still, it raised a question. Why did it take so long to admit something everyone already knew? The answer may be simple. Secrecy works best in silence. The longer you deny, the more confusion you create. And in confusion, it's hard to tell fact from fiction. In that confusion, Area 51 became more than a base. It became a symbol of hidden truths, government denial, and things we're not meant to see. But that's just the beginning. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore what really happened at Groom Lake. Beyond spy planes and test flights, we'll uncover how UFO myths, Cold War secrets, and psychological operations turned Area 51 into one of the most mysterious places on Earth. The real question is, what did the government hide in the shadows, and why? Chapter 2. Spy planes and shifting skies. In the dry Nevada heat of the mid-1950s, something extraordinary was taking shape in the remote stillness of Groom Lake. At first glance, it looked like a barren stretch of desert. But behind the wire, something fast, something silent, and something not meant for civilian eyes was preparing to take flight. As Cold War tensions escalated, the United States needed an edge. A way to see behind the Iron Curtain. Satellite technology was still years away, and traditional reconnaissance planes risked being shot down. The solution would come from the minds at Lockheed Skunk Works and the long shadow of the CIA. The birth of America's most secret aircraft programs, the U-2, the Sky Spy. The first of these was the U-2. a high-altitude surveillance plane that could fly above 70,000 feet, well beyond the reach of Soviet anti-aircraft missiles at the time. Its mission: take photographs of enemy installations and movements across vast distances. But this incredible height had an unexpected side effect. Pilots of commercial aircraft flying far below would look up, see the shining silver glint of something moving impossibly fast and high, and report it as a UFO. Civilians on the ground would look into the dusk and spot reflections or contrails in patterns they couldn't explain. The government, bound by secrecy, couldn't correct them, so the stories grew. In the late 1950s and early 60s, UFO sightings across the US, and particularly in the Southwest, surged dramatically. What few knew was that a huge percentage of these reports coincided with U-2 flights from Area 51. Enter the A-12 Oxcart. But the U-2 wouldn't be enough for long. When the Soviets developed missiles that could reach those altitudes, a new program, codenamed Oxcart, was launched. The result was the A-12, a sleek, black aircraft that would eventually evolve into the more famous SR-71 Blackbird. The A-12 could cruise at Mach 3 and at altitudes even higher than the U-2. The A-12 was designed to be invisible to radar and move faster than anything the world had ever seen. It was so fast that if a missile was launched at it, the pilot's best defense was to accelerate. Its titanium body would heat up during flight, requiring new materials and manufacturing processes just to keep it in the air. Again, test flights from Groom Lake meant streaks of light in the sky, loud sonic booms, and blurred shapes vanishing in seconds. Radar operators across the US reported unexplainable objects. Civilians described triangles, discs, or flashes that looked too controlled to be natural. But all of it could be traced back to classified test runs, matching UFO reports with flight logs. Years later, when many of these aircraft programs were declassified, researchers went back and compared the times and locations of supposed UFO sightings with actual test flight records. The overlap was staggering. The spike in reported sightings directly correlated with the rise in spy plane activity. In one instance, nearly 50 UFO reports came in over Utah on the same night. The actual cause: a single U-2 on a test run. And this was not accidental. Silence as strategy. Rather than correct the public, or even the lower levels of government, the intelligence community embraced the confusion. UFOs, it turned out, were a perfect cover story. If someone saw a spy plane they weren't supposed to, the military would rather have them think it was aliens than reveal its existence to the Soviets. So the CIA and Air Force allowed the mythology to spread. Sometimes they even encouraged it. In 1992, the CIA quietly admitted in a report that more than half of all UFO reports in the 1950s and 60s could be attributed to U-2 flights. But by then, the mythology had grown too large to be reined in. The sightings were real, but the objects weren't always extraterrestrial. They were experimental, homegrown, and incredibly dangerous. Still, the secrecy bred suspicion. Every lie to protect a classified program created space for 1,000 theories, and those theories often looked toward the stars, the Blackbird's shadow. By the time the SR-71 Blackbird took to the skies in the 1960s, the idea that the US government was hiding alien craft had already solidified in public imagination. The Blackbird was faster and higher flying than anything before it, and even though it was eventually acknowledged, it carried with it the mystique of decades of secrecy. In the silence of the desert, with no official explanation, people made up their own. Every flash of light, every strange sonic boom, every piece of metal in the dirt, it all became evidence. But the real story, in many ways, was even more impressive. human-engineered marvels, decades ahead of their time, flying in secret over one of the most secure locations on Earth, and all of it wrapped in a veil of denial. Even when documents were released, they were redacted beyond comprehension. Groom Lake didn't exist, Area 51 was just a desert, and the truth remained miles above ordinary reach. Now that you've seen the aircraft and the facts behind the sightings, what happens when you mix Cold War secrecy, public hysteria, and a government unwilling to explain itself? You get the perfect storm for a UFO movement, and that movement was just getting started. Chapter 3: Aliens, Roswell, and the Public Mind. On July 1947, something strange fell from the sky in Roswell, New Mexico. A rancher named Mac Brazel stumbled across scattered debris. Metallic, lightweight, oddly structured. He couldn't explain it. No one could. And when the military arrived, it only got stranger. At first, the U.S. Army Air Forces released a bold statement. They had recovered a flying disc. Newspapers ran with the headline. Public curiosity exploded. But just a day later, the military retracted the story, claiming it was merely a weather balloon. That sudden switch, that jarring reversal, planted a seed of doubt in the American mind. Why say flying disc, only to take it back so quickly? For many, it was the moment that opened a doorway, a possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, the government wasn't telling the whole truth. And just over 600 miles away, hidden in the Nevada desert, was a location no one had heard of yet. A dry lake bed with no public access, no listed coordinates, no name. Years later, it would be called Area 51. But even before that name became legend, the connection was forming. As the Roswell incident slipped into myth and memory, something else was quietly being born. A shift in how people viewed their government and the sky. Roswell's lingering legacy. Why does Roswell continue to matter? The debris found on the Foster Ranch was officially explained away. Project Mogul, a classified program involving high-altitude balloons meant to detect Soviet nuclear tests. That's the explanation the Air Force offered decades later. But for many, it didn't add up. Witnesses described memory metal material that crumpled and returned to shape. They spoke of strange symbols, unnatural silence from authorities, and sealed-off crash sites. Major Jesse Marcel, one of the first military officers on the scene, later broke his silence. He said publicly that what he saw was not made by human hands. He claimed he was ordered to stay quiet, and the secrecy around the incident, over time, only made the public more curious. With no internet, no cell phones, no social media, information traveled slowly, but it still traveled. Radio shows began discussing flying saucers. Authors published books. Rumors began linking Roswell with hidden locations, underground bases, and recovered technology. And, quietly, the desert base near Groom Lake became a central figure in those theories. The birth of UFO culture. By the 1950s and 60s, America was swept by a UFO wave. The public was fascinated with the skies. News reports of flying discs appeared everywhere. Some sightings had clear explanations. Whether balloons, aircraft reflections, astronomical misidentifications. But others didn't. And as government silence continued, imagination filled the gaps. Hollywood responded. Films like The Day the Earth Stood Still and Earth vs. the Flying Saucers captivated audiences. Aliens became metaphors, sometimes for foreign threats, sometimes for the unknown future. But always, the message lingered. Something is up there, and we're not being told the truth. TV shows like The Outer Limits and later The Twilight Zone offered eerie stories that mirrored real fears of invasion, of control, of contact with something greater than ourselves. This cultural shift wasn't just entertainment, it was the mind of a nation evolving under a growing web of secrecy. And Area 51, still officially unacknowledged, was slowly becoming the center of this web. The link forms. Roswell plus Area 51. In the 1980s, something changed. A new wave of interest in Roswell emerged. Investigators returned to the site. New witnesses spoke up. The original story gained traction again. But now, with a twist, theorists began to argue that after the Roswell crash, the debris, and maybe even alien bodies, were taken not to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, as some believed, but it actually ended up in a secret site in Nevada. A place with no name, a place hidden behind mountains, security fences, and restricted airspace. The idea was irresistible. A crash in 1947, a mysterious base built just a few years later. Could it be that Area 51 was created to study what was found in Roswell? From there, the stories grew. Researchers speculated about reverse engineering programs, hidden laboratories deep underground, scientists working on alien propulsion, test flights of craft that defied gravity. It didn't matter if the evidence was thin. The mystery itself was a kind of gravity pulling attention toward it, drawing in curiosity, fear, and wonder. The power of media and myth. The late 80s and early 90s saw a boom in UFO interest, fueled by mass media. Shows like Unsolved Mysteries and Sightings ran segments on alien abductions. Roswell and Area 51. People watched in millions, but nothing shifted public consciousness more than the X-Files. Premiering in 1993, the show followed two FBI agents investigating paranormal events, government conspiracies, and alien contact. Its tagline, "The truth is out there," became a national obsession. The show's aesthetic, tone, and themes were deeply inspired by real-world UFO lore, including Roswell and Area 51, and it didn't shy away from pointing fingers at intelligence agencies, hidden agendas, and military secrecy. Suddenly, the idea that the government was hiding contact with aliens wasn't just a fringe theory, it was dinner-table conversation. Movies followed suit. Independence Day brought Area 51 into the mainstream, showing an underground base storing alien spacecraft from Roswell. The film cemented the link in pop culture. Roswell plus Area 51 is equal to government secrets and alien tech. But was this connection purely fiction, or was it a controlled narrative, encouraged or even planted to mislead the public? Psychological operations or accidental truth? Here lies one of the most fascinating questions. Was the blending of Roswell, aliens, and Area 51 into entertainment an accident of culture, or was it something more calculated? Declassified CIA documents reveal that during the height of UFO sightings in the 1950s, the agency explored how to use UFO stories as cover-up for classified aircraft. Spy planes, like the U-2, flew at altitudes previously unknown. Civilian pilots who spotted them thought they were seeing flying saucers. The CIA didn't correct them. Why would they? Letting the public believe in aliens helped keep real secrets safe. And once that pattern was established, it became difficult to tell what was intentional misdirection and what was genuine mystery. Roswell could have been a real crash. It could have been a test balloon, or it could have been a real crash, covered up by layers of false stories to keep the public confused. In that confusion, the truth becomes nearly impossible to see. And in the center of it all, silent, watchful, and heavily guarded, sits Area 51. By the late 1990s, the connection between Roswell and Area 51 wasn't just a theory. It was a cultural monument. Tourists traveled to Nevada, hoping to glimpse the truth. Bookshelves filled with titles claiming inside knowledge. Radio shows like Coast to Coast AM dedicated entire episodes to sightings, abductions, and secret bases. Whether any of it was true almost didn't matter anymore. And if Roswell was the match that lit the fire, Area 51 was the smoke-covered bunker where the flames still burn. In the next chapter, we'll explore the voices of those who claim to have seen the truth firsthand. Whistleblowers, scientists, and former insiders who risked everything to tell their stories. Some were praised, some were mocked, others vanished. Let's step deeper into the shadow. Chapter 4. The Bob Lazar Effect. If Roswell was the spark, and Area 51 was the fire, then Bob Lazar was the explosion. In the late 1980s, a man stepped into the spotlight with a story so strange, so detailed, and so daring that it would change the conversation around Area 51 forever. His name, Bob Lazar. Before Lazar, Area 51 was mostly known in whispers. UFO enthusiasts and researchers had speculated about what might happen behind the barbed wire and armed gates. But with Lazar came claims of alien spacecraft, advanced propulsion systems, unknown elements, and reverse engineering programs unlike anything the public had ever heard before. But who exactly was Bob Lazar? And why do so many people still believe him while others call him the greatest hoaxer in modern conspiracy history? Let's go back to where it all began. In May of 1989, investigative reporter George Knapp aired an interview on Las Vegas TV station KLAS with a mysterious man, his face shadowed, his identity concealed. He claimed to have worked at a site near Area 51 called S4, located near Papoose Lake. His job, he said, wasn't ordinary. He wasn't just building jets or fixing electronics. He was part of a reverse engineering team, tasked with studying recovered alien spacecraft to understand how they worked. According to Lazar, there were 9 different flying saucers being held at this facility, each unique in design, some damaged, some functional. He described the crafts as small, smooth, and eerily simple on the outside. Like polished metallic domes, inside, everything was built for being smaller than humans. No switches, no rivets, no visible seams. It was as if they were grown rather than assembled. The propulsion system, he claimed, operated using a mysterious substance. Element 115. A new frontier, Lazar said. The ships were powered by a reactor that used a stable isotope of element 115, then completely unknown to science. This element, he explained, generated gravity waves. By manipulating these waves, the craft could bend space-time, allowing for propulsion without traditional engines. He described it like this. Imagine placing a heavy bowling ball on a trampoline. Now place a marble nearby. The marble rolls toward the ball because of the depression. The craft, he claimed, didn't fly in the conventional sense. It fell forward by bending the space ahead of it. To those unfamiliar with physics, it sounded revolutionary. To experts, it sounded suspicious. Element 115, or Moscovium, wasn't officially discovered until 2003, and it was first synthesized in 2004 by a joint team of Russian and American scientists. But the version created in labs was highly unstable, lasting only milliseconds before decaying. The Whistleblowers details? Lazar gave incredibly specific details about his alleged work. He described security protocols, the layout of S4, the appearance of the hangar doors built into the side of a mountain. He said he had to pass through hand scanners that measured bone length, something that sounded absurd at the time, but was later revealed to be real technology used by US security forces. He also talked about the flight patterns of the saucers. On certain nights, he claimed, test flights were scheduled. and he even brought friends to observe them from a distance. In fact, Lazar's public exposure came after he was caught sneaking near the base with a group of people, observing lights in the sky, supposedly from test flights. It was only after this that he came forward publicly, using his real name. But that's where things started to unravel. The background check mystery. Critics immediately began digging into Lazar's past. He claimed to have degrees from MIT and Caltech, but no records could be found. No classmates, no professors, no thesis papers, nothing. He said he worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory, but again, no employee files were found, though his name did appear in a Los Alamos directory, which raised questions. Was he lying? Were his records erased? Supporters of Lazar believe his background was deliberately scrubbed by the government to discredit him. Deniability is, after all, a key element in secret programs. If someone speaks out, make it seem like they never existed, but others argue this is just convenient. An easy excuse to explain missing evidence. If Lazar never went to MIT or Caltech and never worked in classified programs, then the rest of his story collapses. And yet, the things he described about the base, the technology, and the protocols did line up with certain facts that weren't publicly known at the time. Lies, truths, and the grey area. Bob Lazar never claimed to be a hero. He never asked for money. He avoided the spotlight for years after the initial interviews. He said the only reason he came forward was fear that his life was in danger after being discovered leaking information. Going public, he believed, would protect him, and for decades, he stuck to his story, never expanding it, never adding wild new claims, just repeating what he initially said. That consistency is what keeps many people listening. In 2018, a documentary directed by Jeremy Corbell brought Lazar's story back to public attention, titled Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers. The film reignited debates. Some viewers were convinced, others were skeptical, but nearly everyone agreed. Something about Bob Lazar doesn't fit into a neat box. Either he is one of the greatest truth-tellers of the modern era, or one of the most skilled fabricators in the world of conspiracy law. Scientific scrutiny. Science, of course, demands proof. And that's where Lazar's story struggles. He has no evidence, no photos, no documents, no sample of element 115. Nothing that can be tested. His explanations, while intriguing, often fall apart under strict scientific review. Physicists note that his descriptions of gravity waves and reactor technology don't match known principles, and the fact that no stable version of element 115 has ever been created is a major hole in his claims. But some argue that's the point. If the technology is truly not of this world, then our science might not be ready to understand it yet. It becomes a circular argument, one that can't be proved or disproved. Government silence. Perhaps the strangest part of Lazar's story is how the government has responded. They haven't. There's been no official comment, no denial, no lawsuits, no attempt to publicly discredit him. Nothing. In a world where secrets are protected at all costs, wouldn't the government move to shut him down if he were exposing the truth? Or would ignoring him be a more effective way to keep the story buried? Cultural impact. Whether true or false, Bob Lazar had a massive impact. He put Area 51 on the map in a way that no one else had. His interviews were shared on VHS tapes in the 90s, shown at conventions, and debated on late-night radio. He turned S-Fort into a household phrase for UFO believers. And he made element 115 famous long before science caught up. He also created the modern template for the government whistleblower. Someone with inside knowledge, secret credentials, and nothing left to lose. Since then, Many have followed his path. Few have had the same influence. So, did he make it all up? This is the question that still divides people. There's no hard evidence to prove Lazar right. But there's just enough mystery, just enough detail, just enough consistency to make you wonder. He never sought fame. He didn't try to sell merchandise. He built a small business working on scientific equipment. He stayed quiet for decades, and when asked, all these years later, if he would do it again, he simply says, "No. I wish I had never spoken." True or false, Bob Lazar became part of the legend. Not just of Area 51, but of how a single voice, whispering something impossible, can change the way we see the world. In the next chapter, we'll take a step beyond Lazar and dive into the decades of strange sightings, government denials, and insider claims that kept the Area 51 myth alive, from test pilots to radar operators, engineers to UFO chasers. We'll look at the testimonies that continue to blur the line between secrecy and the supernatural. Chapter 5. Cold War, Cloaks, Propaganda and Disinformation. Dim the lights. Settle deeper into your bed. We're entering a chapter where fact and fiction don't just blur. They are deliberately woven together. Welcome to the Cold War, where secrets didn't just stay hidden. They were weaponized. For many, the story of Area 51 is a tale of aliens and spacecraft. But what if we told you those alien stories were meant to be believed? That they weren't just convenient distractions, but carefully planted seeds. Seeds of doubt, seeds of wonder, and above all, seeds of disinformation. Because during the Cold War, the truth wasn't just hidden from enemies, it was hidden from you. Let's go back to the 1950s and 1960s. An era defined by fear. Fear of communism, fear of nuclear war, fear of the unknown. The Cold War wasn't fought with bullets. It was fought with information and misinformation. As the US and the Soviet Union raced to build faster jets, higher flying bombers, and devastating nuclear weapons, there was something else being built in the shadows. And Area 51, it became a stage for one of the greatest mind games in modern history. UFOs, the perfect cover. By the mid-1950s, UFO sightings were exploding across America. News reports, radio shows, even military personnel were filing detailed encounters. And yet, many of those sightings matched the exact flight times and altitudes of secret aircraft being tested at Groom Lake, such as the U-2 spy plane, which flew higher than any aircraft before it. Civilians simply had no frame of reference for anything flying at 60,000 feet. So what did they see? A metallic object, silent, moving too fast, too high, with strange glows from reflective surfaces catching the sun. To a civilian, that's a UFO. To the government, that's the perfect distraction. And rather than correct the record, the CIA had a better idea. Let them believe it. According to declassified CIA documents released in 2013, the agency actively monitored UFO reports that corresponded with the test flights of U-2 and later, the A-12 and SR-71 programs. They didn't debunk them. They didn't clarify them. They let them spread. Because the more people believed in extraterrestrials, the less they asked about radar-evading aircraft or nuclear-capable drones. A pilot sees something strange. Must have been aliens. A desert town, spots lights in the sky, Martians. The real truth. That the US was testing spy planes in violation of international airspace laws stayed hidden behind little green men. And that was by design. Operation Mockingbird. Controlling the narrative. It wasn't just about letting stories spread. Sometimes the government wanted to guide the story, shape it, filter it through a lens that suited their goals. This is where we enter the foggy realm of Project Mockingbird. Though still partially classified, Mockingbird was an alleged CIA program aimed at influencing journalists, news agencies, and mass media. Some reports suggest the agency had assets placed inside major newsrooms. People who would plant stories, kill others, or steer coverage in subtle ways. In the context of UFOs and Area 51, this meant that stories could be leaked to overshadow real leaks. Imagine this. An engineer leaks that a high-speed aircraft is being tested at Groom Lake. Dangerous information. How do you bury it? Simple. Leak a bigger, weirder story. Say, alien autopsies and crashed saucers. Suddenly, the media frenzy devours the alien angle, and the original leak fades into obscurity, written off as another crazy conspiracy. It wasn't just plausible, it was strategic. The enemy listened to. The Soviets weren't dumb, they were watching everything. So, in some cases, the US may have deliberately allowed UFO hysteria to create confusion. Not just among Americans, but among Soviet intelligence as well. Imagine this, from the Kremlin's point of view. Strange craft flying at impossible altitudes, untraceable tech, and radio silence from the Americans. Could it be real, or could it be something else? That seed of doubt slowed down response times. It clouded decision-making in warfare. Confusion is gold. The Cold War wasn't just about tanks and missiles. It was about narrative dominance. And in the skies above Nevada, the narrative was alien. Psychological operations. The war we never saw. Let us take a step deeper into the rabbit hole. In the 1950s and 60s, the US military wasn't just developing weapons. It was also developing psychological tools. One such initiative was psychological operations. These were campaigns designed to manipulate belief systems, both of foreign enemies and domestic audiences. Could the alien narrative have been part of these PSYOPs? Many researchers think so. For example, stories of alien abductions began rising in the 1960s, just as the US was ramping up mind control experiments like MKUltra, another CIA project shrouded in mystery. Were these abduction stories the result of hallucinations or tests gone wrong? Were people remembering alien spacecraft or military experiments with memory-altering drugs? We may never know, but the timing is curious. And in a Cold War where plausible deniability was the rule, nothing could be ruled out. Leaks, legends, and misdirection. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, more and more stories emerged about Area 51. Some were wildly imaginative. Others were strangely precise. It seemed like every time the government got close to being exposed for something secret, a new alien rumor would pop up. Sometimes the government would flat out deny these stories. Other times, they'd say nothing. That silence was powerful, because in the absence of information, people create their own truths. And in that vacuum, legends are born. The most useful lie. Ask yourself, why would the government allow Area 51 to become the most famous secret base in the world? Wouldn't they try to redirect attention elsewhere? Move operations. Perhaps they did. But what if the myth of Area 51 became more useful than the base itself? What if, by focusing the world's attention on a single desert facility, the US was able to hide more sensitive work somewhere else entirely? Let the public believe the aliens are at Area 51, while the real secrets move underground, offshore, or into corporate black sites. It's misdirection at the highest level. And it works. Belief as a weapon. Here's the twist. When enough people believe something, it becomes real. Not physically, but socially, culturally, politically. Belief itself becomes a kind of weapon, and during the Cold War, both sides used it. From UFO sightings to whispers of alien treaties, From cover stories to psyops, the idea wasn't to prove or disprove aliens. It was to control the story. Because the one who controls the narrative controls the battlefield, and if you can convince the public that the truth is just a crazy conspiracy, then you've already won. In this chapter, we've seen that the alien stories surrounding Area 51 may not be what they seem. They might not be warnings from another world, but mirrors held up by our own governments. Mirrors designed to distort, to confuse, to hide, because the Cold War wasn't just a race for bombs. It was a race for truth control. And in that race, the aliens were just the bait. In the next chapter, we'll follow the modern trail. Leaked videos, Pentagon confirmations, and the rise of unidentified aerial phenomena, because the story didn't end with the Cold War. In many ways, it was just getting started. Chapter 6, Project's Blue Book, Sign and Grudge, Government versus UFOs. Dim the lights. Breathe in slow. Let your body relax. We are about to dive into government corridors where files were marked top secret, witnesses were silenced, and truth was filed under mystery. Welcome to the US government's official dance with the unexplained. It started not in Area 51, but in the open skies of America. The late 1940s were a time of transition. The world had just survived a world war. Nations were rebuilding. Technology was leaping forward. But something else was rising. Not just in the skies, but in the public consciousness. Unidentified flying objects. 1947. The year everything changed. In the summer of 1947, a man named Kenneth Arnold, a private pilot, was flying near Mount Rainier, Washington. He reported seeing 9 shiny objects darting across the sky in formation at unbelievable speeds. He described their motion as like a saucer skipping across water. And with that, the term flying saucer was born. Days later, in Roswell, New Mexico, something crashed on a ranch. The US Army issued a statement. They had recovered a flying disc. Then, less than 24 hours later, they changed their story. No disc, just a weather balloon. It was a quick reversal. Too quick, and from that moment on, the seeds of distrust were planted. Project Sign, the first step into the unknown. In 1948, facing a wave of UFO reports and public curiosity, the US Air Force launched Project Sign, the first official government investigation into UFO. Its goal, to determine if UFOs posed a threat to national security, or if they were foreign aircraft, possibly Soviet. The team was made up of military analysts, scientists, and intelligence officers. But something interesting happened. Early on, several high-ranking officials inside Project Sign became convinced that some of the objects being reported were not of this Earth. They drafted what came to be known as the estimate of the situation, though never officially released a document that allegedly concluded extraterrestrials were the most logical explanation for some sightings. But when that estimate reached General Hoyt Vandenberg, then Chief of Staff of the US Air Force, he rejected it. Vehemently, some accounts suggest he even tore it up and dismissed the conclusions as baseless. Project Sign was soon shut down, and replaced by something colder, Project Grudge. From open inquiry to debunking. In 1949, Project Grudge took over, but the tone had shifted. Where Project Sign showed curiosity, Project Grudge showed dismissal. Its mandate was more about explaining away sightings than investigating them seriously. Psychological explanations, whether phenomena, reflections, birds, aircraft, misidentification, anything but extraterrestrials. According to internal critics, Project Grudge was less about seeking truth and more about reassuring the public, calming fears, maintaining control. Skepticism ruled. Reports were filed. Cases were solved. But quietly, tensions grew. Even within the military, there were believers and non-believers. People who had seen things in the skies, who were now told to ignore or suppress what they knew. It was a war between secrecy and transparency, and neither side was winning. Project Blue Book, the most famous study of all. In 1952, after public pressure and a massive uptick in UFO sightings, the Air Force launched Project Blue Book. It would run until 1969. In total, Blue Book investigated 12,618 sightings. Of those, 701 remained unexplained. The project was headquartered at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, a name that, like Area 51, would become synonymous with mystery and conspiracy. For years, Blue Book was portrayed to the public as the government's honest effort to understand UFOs. But behind the scenes, not everything was so transparent. The battle inside within Project Blue Book. There were factions. On one side, people like Edward Ruppelt, the first director of the project, who genuinely believed in scientific investigation. He coined the term unidentified flying object to replace flying saucer, hoping to bring more credibility and neutrality. Ruppelt pushed for rigorous data collection, reliable witnesses, and careful analysis. On the other side, Air Force officials and intelligence officers who wanted to debunk, downplay, or bury troubling findings. When Ruppelt left Blue Book in 1953, the project's objectivity began to collapse. His successors, particularly Major Hector Quintanilla, seemed more focused on closing cases quickly and publicly reassuring the American people that nothing unusual was going on. The Robertson Panel. Science meets suppression. In 1953, the CIA convened the Robertson Panel, a group of top scientists tasked with evaluating the UFO phenomenon. But their goal wasn't necessarily to seek truth. It was to determine whether UFO stories posed a threat to national security. Not because of aliens, but because mass hysteria could overwhelm communication channels during a real crisis. Their recommendation: downplay the phenomenon, discourage public interest, use media and academia to reduce public enthusiasm for UFOs. In other words, manage the narrative. From that point on, the official stance hardened. UFOs weren't real. Case closed. Except they weren't. Area 51's shadow role. While Project Blue Book ran its public investigations, something far more secretive was happening out in Nevada. At Area 51, high above Groom Lake, the government was testing exotic aircraft like the U-2, a 12 ox cart, and eventually the SR-71 Blackbird. These planes flew at altitudes and speeds that ordinary people had never seen. Many UFO reports, especially those investigated by Blue Book, matched the test routes and altitudes of these classified aircraft. But Blue Book investigators weren't told. Even they didn't know about the operations at Area 51, which meant that sometimes, when they were investigating a strange object in the sky, they were unknowingly chasing their own government secret. They were part of a game whose rules they didn't understand, and that game was rigged. The Condon Report. The nail in the coffin. In the late 1960s, under continued pressure, the U.S. Air Force commissioned the University of Colorado to conduct an independent study of UFOs. Led by physicist Edward Condon, the study examined hundreds of Blue Book cases. The conclusion: there was no scientific benefit in further studying UFOs. It was the justification the government needed. In 1969, Project Blue Book was officially shut down. The Air Force declared the UFO mystery over. But for many, it had just begun. Legacy and fallout. The closure of Project Blue Book didn't end public curiosity. If anything, it intensified it. Former insiders began leaking stories. Whistleblowers hinted at buried cases, hidden craft, and government cover-ups. And Area 51, long rumored to be involved in reverse engineering technology and housing recovered debris, became the central stage for these suspicions. The government may have ended its investigations on paper, but in the public eye, the mystery of UFOs had taken on a life of its own, the divide within. Even now, decades later, we look back at projects Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book not just as government studies, but as reflections of internal conflict, a clash between those who wanted to know the truth and those who feared it, between transparency and national security, between science and secrecy. The files are now declassified. The documents are public, but the mystery remains, because, while those projects asked hard questions, they never truly wanted the answers. In our next chapter, we'll dive into the modern age, where leaked Pentagon footage, pilot testimonies, and congressional hearings are bringing UFOs back into the mainstream. The age of secrecy may be ending, but the age of disclosure, that's just beginning. Chapter 7. Underground Bases. Missing Time and Whistleblowers. Beneath the sun-scorched deserts of Nevada, beyond the barbed wire fences and motion detectors, a deeper story lies hidden, not in the skies, but underground, in shadowed tunnels, in forgotten chambers, in whispers passed between insiders and buried in official denials. This is not the story of just aircraft or satellites. It is the realm of secret bases, missing time, unexplained scars, and voices telling stories no one wants to believe. This is Chapter 7. Underground Bases, Missing Time, and Whistleblowers. The rumors beneath the dust. Area 51, for decades, has been synonymous with secret aircraft and alien lore. But by the 1980s and 90s, a new layer to the mythology began to grow. Underground bases, not just one facility, but vast tunnel systems stretching for miles beneath the desert, connecting Groom Lake to other supposed secret installations, like Dulce Base in New Mexico, Site S4, and even Los Alamos. People began reporting strange construction deliveries late at night, the arrival of large-scale boring machines, the presence of contractors who would suddenly vanish, and the whispers of black-budget projects so classified, not even members of Congress could get access. Were there bases below Area 51? What were they for? Storage, experiments, or something darker? The whistleblowers speak. Then came the whistleblowers, individuals who claimed they had worked in these underground locations, and left with stories that blurred the line between science fiction and government secrecy. One such man was Phil Schneider, a former geological engineer who said he was involved in building underground bases for the US government. In public lectures before his death, Schneider claimed the US had at least 129 deep underground military bases. These bases were connected by magnetic levitation trains, running over 7,000 miles per hour. He had encountered non-human entities during excavation at Dulce Base in 1979. Schneider presented scars on his body as evidence, alleging that during the encounter he was injured in a firefight with Greys, a race of alien beings. Skeptics dismissed his claims, but his sudden and controversial death in 1996 only fueled conspiracy theorists, officially ruled a suicide. Many point to inconsistencies and missing documents. Was Schneider telling the truth, or had his own mind betrayed him? Abduction, amnesia, and missing time. Parallel to these whistleblower testimonies was the rise of another phenomenon. Abduction accounts. From the late 60s through the 90s, thousands of people across the world began reporting similar experiences. Waking up, paralyzed in bed, seeing shadowy figures in their rooms, blinding lights and floating sensations, being examined aboard strange craft, and most mysteriously, missing time hours they couldn't account for. Men like Dr. David Jacobs, a historian turned abduction researcher, interviewed hundreds of these individuals. Many of them had never spoken to each other, yet their stories were eerily alike. Were these psychological episodes, mass delusions, or fragmented memories of something far more real? Hypnotic regression revealed more details. Clinical settings, metallic rooms, alien beings with large heads and black eyes, and sometimes hybrid children. That's right. Many abductees claimed they were shown children that were part human, part something else. Were these memories implanted, or were they real? MK Ultra, mind control and experiments in the shadows. It might be tempting to dismiss all this as science fiction, but let's pause. In the 1970s, the US government declassified documents from a program called MK Ultra. It was a real CIA project focused on mind control, hallucinogenic drugs, and behavioral conditioning. The experiments included administering LSD without consent, sensory deprivation, hypnosis, and memory erasure. Psychological torture. If the government had the willingness and resources to run such operations in secret for decades, what else might they have pursued? Some researchers suggest a connection between abduction narratives and early MK Ultra-style programming, implying that at least some of these abductions could have been human-run experiments, masked by alien imagery. Others go further, proposing that government and extraterrestrial groups were working together in underground bases on genetic experimentation and consciousness manipulation. Hard to prove, but equally hard to ignore. Real science or fringe belief. So what are we to make of this? Let's pull back and examine the evidence. We know underground facilities exist. NORAD, Cheyenne Mountain, Raven Rock. These are real and massive. We know MKUltra happened. A fact. We know many whistleblowers and abductees report eerily similar experiences, despite geographic and cultural differences. But what we lack is physical, peer-reviewed, independently verified proof of extraterrestrial contact or hybrid programs. And yet, the government has admitted in recent years that UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, are real. Pilots have encountered them. Videos have been released, so maybe the truth is layered. Perhaps some of the underground base stories are exaggerated. Perhaps some abductions are dream states or psychological trauma. But perhaps some are real. And that possibility is why people keep digging, keep asking, keep wondering. The veil between reality and secrecy. In the end, this chapter is less about proving and more about opening the door. Because when enough people tell stories that match, even without proof, those stories start to mean something. And in a world filled with secrets, sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones closest to the truth. Next, in Chapter 8, we explore how disclosure is unfolding in real time. From Pentagon admissions to political hearings, the walls of silence are starting to crack. And what we might find behind them could change everything. Chapter 8. The shadow lives on. In the silence of the Nevada desert, beneath a sky littered with stars, there lies a piece of land that still doesn't officially exist on most maps. Area 51. For decades, it has been a symbol of everything the public isn't allowed to know. A place where secrets are stored, stories are created, and truths are buried. But today, in the 21st century, what does Area 51 mean? Not just as a military base, but as an idea. In 2017, something unusual happened. The US government, which for years had denied all involvement with UFOs, publicly confirmed the existence of a secret Pentagon program, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or AATIP. Even more shocking were the videos released alongside this admission. Footage captured by Navy pilots showing fast-moving, unidentified objects behaving in ways that defied known physics. The most famous of these? The TikTok video, a smooth, white, oval-shaped object with no visible wings, engines, or exhaust, zipping across the sky, stopping and accelerating with impossible speed, and it was tracked by some of the world's most advanced fighter jets. Suddenly, what used to be fringe conspiracy became front-page news. The government didn't say these objects were aliens, but they didn't say they weren't either. They simply called them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, and that single word change, UFO to UAP, reflected something bigger. A shift in how the topic was discussed, researched, and treated in official circles. Congress began holding hearings. Pilots were encouraged, for the first time, to report encounters without fear of ridicule. Whistleblowers like David Grudge, a former intelligence officer, came forward publicly, claiming the US government has recovered non-human craft, and possibly even biologics, and has been keeping it hidden for decades through a complex web of black projects. These claims reignited the public's imagination, but they also raised a haunting question. If something that sounded like science fiction might actually be real, then what else have we dismissed for too long? Area 51, once dismissed as a fringe obsession, was now central again in discussions of transparency, secrecy, and national defense. And yet, the base itself remains as secretive as ever. Satellite imagery shows new construction, expanded hangars, new runways. The security is tighter than ever. No drones, no cameras, no explanation. There are still reports of strange lights in the sky, of sounds that can't be traced, of visitors encountering unmarked vehicles long before they even reach the official boundary. In an age of increasing openness, Area 51 stands as a paradox, both a relic of the Cold War and a mirror of our modern age. An age where misinformation is everywhere, where facts are hard to separate from fiction, and where public trust in institutions continues to fall. So what does Area 51 truly represent? Maybe it's more than a military base. Maybe it's an idea, a symbol of how far governments will go to protect what they believe must be hidden, a reminder that secrets create stories, and stories create belief. Perhaps that's why Area 51 endures, because it reflects not only the mysteries of the skies, but the shadows of our own minds. It asks uncomfortable questions. Who decides what the public should know? Can a democracy thrive when truth is filtered through layers of secrecy? And in the end, what if some of the wildest stories we heard were never just stories? Because that's the real legacy of Area 51. Not just what's inside the fences, but what it has made us imagine, fear, and question. A patch of desert in Nevada became the epicenter of something much bigger. A cold war of ideas, a battleground between belief and denial. And whether you believe in aliens or not, whether you think the government knows everything or nothing at all, one truth remains. The shadow of Area 51 still stretches far beyond the desert, and it's not going anywhere. So, after nearly 1 hour wandering the dust-choked paths of Groom Lake, examining hidden files, listening to whispers from decades past, and studying the glow of lights in the desert sky, what have we really uncovered? Perhaps not a definitive answer, perhaps not a clear confession, but maybe something more important. A truth about why we ask. Area 51 is more than a secret base. It's a symbol of the walls between citizens and their governments, of the cost of technology wrapped in silence, of the strange dance between belief and disbelief, fact and fiction, light and shadow. People chase answers because deep down, We all want to believe that the world is bigger, stranger, and more complex than we're told, that there are things left to discover, that the unknown still exists. Sometimes it's not about aliens or flying saucers or secret aircraft. Sometimes it's about power. Who holds it, who hides it, and why? The deeper you dig, the blurrier the lines become between truth and propaganda, between science and story, between what is real and what is made to be believed. In that way, Area 51 is not just a piece of land in Nevada. It's a reflection, a mirror that shows us not just what may lie out there, but what lies within us. Curiosity, doubt, wonder, fear. That's why, even after decades of denial, blurry footage, and classified files, people are still watching the skies, still asking questions, still listening for what no one else can hear. Because in the end, the search isn't just about UFOs. It's about understanding who we are and what we're not being told. Thank you for spending this journey with History Wake. We're not done exploring yet. In the next deep dive, we're heading into another web of secrets. One that stretches from the forests of Germany to the hidden offices of Washington, D.C., secret weapons, and the men who tried to stop the march of tyranny in ways history has nearly forgotten. Until then, stay curious, stay awake, and remember, some shadows don't disappear, they wait.